Hi and welcome back. If you haven't been here before, my name's Lee. So today I want to talk about why I don't really understand why the Europeans, the US and a few other countries want to appear to prolong the Ukrainian war. Instead of trying to broker peace and a diplomatic solution, they want to continue to send more weapons to Ukraine, which will ultimately end up in the deaths of more people. Now, we're going to have a look at an article today from the Financial Times again. But before we do that, I'd just like to play a small video clip by a member of the European Parliament, Daly, because I think she hits the nail on the head here and probably does a better job than I can do. So let's have a listen.
Grazie, Presidente. So, the EU solution to the war in Ukraine is more war. Pile in the weapons, splurge on militarism, threaten to engage in all-out economic and financial war against Russia. So the same things you were doing already and expecting a different result. The true definition of madness. How is not selling Kerrygold butter to Russia going to save any Ukrainian lives? How is buying filthy fracked US gas going to stop the war? They won't, of course, because nowhere have sanctions ever succeeded in ending a military assault or achieving regime change. But what they have done is unleash economic devastation. This time round, which will be paid for by the people of Russia, including those out protesting against the war, and increasingly being paid for by the citizens of Europe, facing massive energy price hikes, inflation and a catastrophic decline in their living standards. Talk about shooting ourselves in the foot. And of course, this moral outrage at Russia's illegal war, which has sparked this lunacy, is in sharp contrast to the lack of any such scruples in terms of the illegal US wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, which we not only didn't condemn, but we actually joined in and continue to do business with them all the way. No such scruples about Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. And even as the victims of those conflicts in the last few weeks meet to desperately seek financial pledges for their humanitarian crisis, they're being left short by billions, while we're happy to spend billions prolonging the war in Ukraine. Makes me absolutely sick. 7 weeks ago, German's Chancellor Scholz correctly said, peace in Europe cannot be won against Russia. But that's exactly what we're doing. Yes, Russia bears responsibility for this conflict. Of course they do. But we cannot ignore the role of NATO. And the EU, instead of promoting peace and acting in the interests of the people of Europe, the Ukrainians, the EU citizens, and yes, the Russian citizens too, has become a tool of NATO and the military-industrial complex. What is needed is an end to the conflict, an end to militarism, a ceasefire and a negotiated settlement. We should restore our role as a diplomatic one of promoting peace. Anything else makes us complicit.
So, okay, let's have a look at this article from the Financial Times. I will link the article in the description, but it is behind a paywall. And it sort of backs up what I was saying at the start of the video by the West not appearing to not want to see an end to this war. So the title of the article is NATO states agree to supply heavy weapons to Ukraine. And it starts off by saying NATO member states have agreed to supply new types of advanced weaponry to Ukraine. Alliance representatives said as Kiev prepares for an offensive by Russia in the country's east. The pledge came after a plea from Ukraine's foreign minister for Western countries to move faster with supplies or risk seeing many people die because this help came too late. Now, it then goes on, Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba said he would use a NATO meeting in Brussels to ask for aircraft, missiles, armoured vehicles and heavy air defence system, among others. Liz Truss, UK Foreign Secretary, told reporters after the meeting that member states had backed giving more weapons. And Anthony Blinken, US Secretary of State, says Washington was looking at sending new systems to Ukraine. We are not going to let anything stand in the way of getting Ukrainians what they need, he said. We are looking across the board right now, and not only at what we have provided, but whether there are additional systems that would make a difference. Now, one thing that puzzles me a little bit about this is that, from what I understand, a majority of the Ukrainian forces are surrounded by Russian military. So I'm just wondering how they're going to get these additional systems to the Ukrainian military. So the article then goes on to say NATO member countries supplied Ukraine with anti-tank missiles, drones and other defensive weaponry before and during the war. However, they have declined to supply other classes of weapons or impose a no-fly zone, as Kiev has demanded, over the risk of engaging Russia in a wider war. Now, obviously, this is something that has been talked about a lot, the imposing a no-fly zone, and it seems that the NATO countries or the US are not prepared to do this, because this could spark a wider conflict, with Russia retaliating against any countries that shot down a Russian aircraft over Ukrainian airspace. And the article then goes on to say that Jens Stoltenberg, NATO's Secretary General, said allies had agreed to further strengthen support for Ukraine immediately and in the medium and long term. It was a clear message from the meeting today that allies should do more and are ready to do more to supply more equipment. They realise and recognise the urgency, he said. So it's clear from what Claire Daly has said, and it's clear from what we've just seen in the Financial Times report, that the West, i.e. Europe and the US and a couple of other countries, Australia, Japan, seem to have no interest in ending the war in Ukraine. Apart from, these are countries that should be pushing a diplomatic solution similar to China and India are trying to push. However, all we hear the talk of is to send more weapons. But another question I have is, how do they plan to get these weapons to the Ukrainian forces? Because from what I understand, Ukrainian forces are pretty much surrounded in the areas of the conflict in Ukraine. And by all sort of reports I'm reading, that the war is almost over. Ukraine in the areas of interest to Russia are almost defeated. And I guess this is one of the reasons why the West want to prolong the war, because they don't want to admit that Ukraine has been defeated. We constantly see tweets and media saying that Ukraine are winning, Ukraine are winning. However, that is not the impression I get from the sort of media I'm reading. And it's notable that in the UK media especially, this kind of media is tending to die down now. You look a week or two ago, they were very bullish about how Ukraine was winning this war, but they've gone very, very quiet. So the question I'd like you to answer for me down in the comments below is, why are the West prolonging this war? Anyway, for now, as always, take care.